study the sutta, I'd like to just tell you a bit about how to approach a sutta. Basically, some principles of sutta study. Now, any kind of religious scripture comes up or grew and were collected over time in a certain place. And very often the scriptures also reflect the culture, the politics, what's called the Zeitgeist in German, which simply means the spirit of the time, if you like. For example, the spirit of the Buddha's time is that of this growing success, this prosperity, this new prosperity that's arising, very much like in Singapore today, although in Singapore a much bigger degree, this newfound wealth that is arising, and middle class, especially the Kshatriyas in this case, becoming very powerful, the Brahmins losing their influence, the kings becoming very powerful. The roots of empire were beginning in India. Asoka's empire did not start suddenly. The roots started in the Buddha's time. So we have all this kind of background which can be seen, which form a very important part of the suttas. Suttas are not just cut and dry stories. They reflect the background of the religion. Some religions, for example, the so-called Abrahamic religions, the Judaism, Christianity, Islam, their background is in the Middle East, in Israel, Palestine, and it was a background very much of war, violence. So you begin to see the language of the religion also reflected in the same way, of the language of power, and so on. So you see this kind of the worldly aspects of the scripture. And in the Buddhist scripture you see a lot of that too. Of course, in Buddhist scripture you see much more of the peacefulness, because the Buddhist training, as we know very well, talks a lot about mind training. But India of the Buddha's time, it was very rich in stories, mythology, the kind of mythology that the Indians were used to, and today also, the kind of mythology they are used to is very similar to the kind of mythology that the ancient Greeks had. In fact, Greek mythology, Western European mythologies, the Viking mythologies, and the Indian mythologies, they all come the same family. And there are some scholars who actually have done comparative study, and they find many of the gods, many of the stories actually reflect one another. The Indian stories, the Greek stories, the Viking stories, and so on. So you begin to see a very interesting kind of a world culture there, if you like. But remember, stories are stories. Because some of the stories are very fantastic. I mean, we talk about demons appearing, demons, human eating demons, and the gods come down, talk to the Buddha, and the Buddha going into some far quadrant of outer space to talk to some saints or meet the devas, none of which we experience today. So we have quite a big problem here, trying to explain to the new generation, the young people who are very used to science and technology. However, we also watch television, right? If you watch television, the space movies, or for that matter, any kind of movie, there are a lot of stories, a lot of fantastic stories. If you happen to watch, say, the Star Trek series, the Stargate series, Star Wars series, you find there are lots of strange beings, and there are new universes, new technology and so on. And we enjoy such stories. How do we enjoy such stories? We suspend our judgment for a while. We just enjoy the story as it is. So in that sense, we should have the same approach when you read these ancient Buddhist texts. There are lots of such stories also. In this sutta, this short simple sutta, you see this monk actually meeting a deva, a divine being, and these divine beings often would appear to their relatives on earth. Normally they are related to these monks or these merchants, and they will tell these monks or merchants the Buddha, about the Buddha and so on. In some cases, you have these devas who are the ex-spouses of these monks, ex-wives of these monks. So these devas will come and they fall in love with the monk again. And then you have the monk admonishing, teaching the deva. And then they bringing the deva to see the Buddha, and then the Buddha teaching the deva and so on. So you have all these kinds of very interesting scenarios, arrangement where the Buddha's teaching is given to us, various contexts. And of course, it would be very strange if we are to believe everything literally. Now, I can't tell you whether these stories are true or not. All I can say is I don't know. But I won't be surprised if they are true, because if the scientists tell us that there's so many, the universe is so big, there are other forms of life elsewhere, we can, at least with a grain of salt, accept the fact that there may be, surely there must be other life forms like human beings, or maybe even more intelligent than human beings elsewhere. Perhaps the devas refer to some kind of very super intelligent, super powerful aliens from some other universe, which we call heavens because it's so far away. So all this we don't know. In a sense, we don't need to know if we are to really practice Buddhism, but the stories are there. So how do we approach this kind of colorful narratives? There is a sutta called the Neyata Nitata Sutta from the Book of Tools in Anguttara, where the Buddha says, whenever you read a sutta, you must ask yourself, what is the level of language that this sutta is addressing? Alright? In other words, there are two things you must remember here, written here on the left side of the whiteboard. You have what are called the implicit teachings, indirect teachings, and the explicit teachings, the direct teachings. Implicit, the Pali word is neyata. Atta means meaning. Neya means you must bring it out, tease it out. You must find out, what does this passage mean? This neyata, implicit, indirect. Then there are those which are direct, explicit teachings. Nitata. Nita, that means brought out. Meaning has been brought out. It's very easy to remember. In the suttas where the Buddha uses direct Dharma terms. For example, the Buddha will tell us these are the five aggregates: form, feeling, perception, formation, consciousness. They are impermanent. This is the language of explicit Dharma, direct, referring to true reality. So that's explicit teaching. Whenever the Buddha mentions there was a being, there was a king, the Buddha mentions devas, humans. Whenever concepts are used in the way we tell stories, then those are implicit. In other words, we've got to ask ourselves, what is the Buddha telling us here? What is the meaning of this passage? Where do these words and stories point to, in other words? Right? So, for example, if the sutta says the devas and the asuras were fighting each other, and then they suffered as a result of their fighting and so on, the Buddha is not talking about some space wars. although it may well have happened, we don't know. What the Buddha is talking about here is that even the gods, supposed to be very superhuman, are also filled with defilements. They fight. The asuras, of course, are very fierce demons. So you find they fight. So they are not, although they are heavenly beings, they are not perfect. And they die. They live for long periods of time, but they will die. So that is what and how we have to understand the stories. We can say that this is where we take the Buddhist text as literature, right? So whenever you find some of the wordings are like pre-modern, going back to the Indian style, we take it as literature. And we have even modern literature, the writers take liberty. That's what literature is about. Literature describes human behavior, the human conditions, human experiences in a heightened way. In many ways, we read literature, we watch movies based on literature, without needing to go through the sufferings and the pain and the drama that those characters go through. We can learn from all this, in other words. So when we look at the Buddhist text as literature, it's the same thing. We're learning from the text, and provided we ask the right questions. So it's understandable. In Buddhist teachings, we are reminded never to take the text as gospel truth. The truth is not in the word. The truth is in how you see the words. The truth is in where the words point to. It's just like you see the word Johor, Kuala Lumpur, this arrow pointing northwards from here. You don't say, that's the place. Obviously we know it's wrong. It's where this arrow points to. We go in that direction. So the words of the suttas themselves are like that. They are signs and direction guides telling us where to go, how to go there. So the suttas are important in that sense. So it's good to understand the nature and structure of the suttas in this way, because the suttas are very valuable documents, the most valuable document we have in terms of Buddhist practice. So once you understand the suttas, then you find it's easier for your meditation. It's easier to talk about your meditation. You begin to understand you find the vocabulary to describe and talk about your meditation experience, to even understand what's going on in your mind when you meditate. And then the other interesting thing is when you meditate regularly, you find that wisdom, that calmness and clarity of mind helps you to understand the suttas even better. So you begin to see the truth of the teaching, and when you see the truth of the teaching, unavoidably joy arises. So this is called the truth and beauty aspect of Buddhist practice. Where there is truth, there is beauty, and where there are both, there is joy. So that is why in our meditation, the teacher will often tell you, smile, the inner smile, because joy is a very important catalyst to good meditation. You start by smiling, because when you smile, those endorphins, those happy chemicals come out and helps in your meditation, and then you go from there. And when you do your meditation, you're happy, those happy feelings come to you naturally too. Studying suttas also can produce that kind of joy, and that is what keeps us going with the suttas. So this is a bit of background on how to study the suttas, on how to understand the suttas.